I was home alone one night in a house with a finished walkout basement, and I was downstairs when I heard very distinct footsteps moving across the hardwood floor above me. The ceiling down there was low, so the footsteps were probably no more than 1.5 feet above my head. I could hear them clearly enough that I could actually follow where the person seemed to be walking. The footsteps crossed the upstairs living room, moved through the hallway, and eventually went into my parents' bedroom. Then I heard one of the larger drawers in my parents' chest of drawers slide open. At that point, I had no idea what I was dealing with. It could have been someone who had broken into the house, or maybe some stupid kid who had gotten inside. Either way, I wasn't going to take the chance. I loaded a .45 and grabbed a stun gun because I wanted to have something ready in case whoever was upstairs turned out to be dangerous. I stayed downstairs and listened carefully. I kept expecting to hear the drawer slide closed again, but that never happened. There was just silence after it opened. The longer I waited, the more unsettling that became. Eventually, I decided I had to check. I went up the stairs as quietly as I could, trying not to make a sound. The entire upstairs was still dark. I started turning on the lights and checking each room one at a time, making sure there wasn't someone hiding somewhere. When I finally reached my parents' bedroom, there was nobody there. The only door upstairs was the one behind me, back near the top of the stairs. I hadn't heard the footsteps return in that direction, and there wasn't anywhere else for someone to disappear to. I checked the windows and found none of them open. The doors were still locked as well. I was completely confused, but after checking everything, I became convinced that I was alone. I walked over to the chest of drawers to close the drawer I had heard opening, except it was already closed. That was when things became much stranger. Not long before this happened, my parents had met up with a couple they had known back in high school. The husband had apparently had a crush on my mom when they were younger, and after meeting him again, my mom told me she thought he might still have feelings for her because of the way he acted around her. It was an odd situation, but at the time, I didn't think much of it. I couldn't help wondering afterward if somehow there could have been some kind of paranormal connection involved, almost like astral projection, or something familiar to that man acting out a fantasy. The two bottom drawers of that chest were where my mom kept her underwear, which made the whole thing feel even more disturbing. I knew the sound those drawers made extremely well because they were directly above where I normally sat at my computer. I had heard them open and close countless times. What I heard that night didn't sound imaginary to me. It sounded exactly like one of those drawers being pulled open. What bothered me most was what happened afterward. I had been so quiet while moving through the house that I could barely hear myself. If someone had actually been upstairs, there was no realistic way they could have moved back through the house, opened a window, or slipped out a door without me hearing something. That's why I've come to wonder if the drawer ever physically opened at all. Maybe what I heard was somehow projected into my mind by something that wanted to frighten me, or maybe it was trying to communicate something. I don't know. There are some experiences in this world that don't fit neatly into an explanation. There was one more detail I remembered afterward that made the whole situation even more unsettling. Once I was completely sure I was alone, I went back downstairs, turned on the light, and looked at the gun. That's when I noticed that when I had quietly let the slide close earlier, it hadn't actually gone completely into position. It needed the force of the spring to close properly, and because I had been trying to make absolutely no noise, I hadn't allowed it to do that. That meant the gun wouldn't even have fired if I had needed it. Then I checked the stun gun. I pulled the trigger, expecting the usual crackling sound, but all it did was make a small pop every couple of seconds. The battery was almost completely dead. I had gone upstairs believing I was prepared to protect myself, when in reality I was almost completely defenseless without even realizing it. And for some reason, that almost felt like part of the message. As if whatever I had heard was saying, without actually using words, that it could do whatever it wanted and there was nothing I could do to stop it. That thought disturbed me more than the footsteps themselves. My family moved to Patricksburg, Indiana, in 1977. I was born a few years later, in 1980, and when I was 8 years old, I had a waterbed in my room. One night, while I was sleeping, something suddenly pushed against the end of my bed. The movement traveled through the water and sent a ripple all the way toward my head, waking me up. I sat up in the darkness, trying to figure out what had happened. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the room, I saw 4 hooded figures standing around my bed. They didn't appear to have faces. Their arms were folded, and they were simply standing there. I screamed. My mother came rushing into the room, and at 8 years old, I expected her to tell me that I had been dreaming and that I needed to calm down and go back to sleep. Instead, she told me we needed to sit down at the kitchen table and talk. She even woke up my older brother so that he could join us. That was when my mother told me something I wasn't expecting. She and my brother had seen the same figures. She then explained that the first night our family stayed in the house, she had seen a young girl standing inside. The girl was wearing a white blouse and a dark maxi skirt. My mother said the experience didn't feel threatening to her at the time. In fact, she said she had felt strangely peaceful. Because of that, she basically told me to ignore whatever I saw. But I was 8 years old. I had just seen 4 faceless, hooded figures standing around my bed. There was no way I could simply ignore something like that. For most of my childhood, that bedroom became a source of fear. My mother would still send me back into the same room that terrified me, even though she knew something unusual had happened there. It wasn't until I moved out at 17 that my mother eventually stayed one night in my old bedroom herself. After that, she never allowed anyone to sleep in that room again. Eventually, she contacted the television show The Dead Files, and they came to investigate the house. But years before that happened, when I was 9, I experienced what remains one of the strangest and most profound nights of my life. At the time, I thought I had simply experienced an unusually disturbing dream. The next day, however, something felt completely wrong. I walked around all day, feeling like I was in a fog. Whenever someone in my family spoke, their voices sounded distant and strangely echoed. I couldn't explain what was missing, but I had the overwhelming feeling that a part of me was gone. I slept on and off throughout the entire day, and even after that, I never quite felt whole in the same way again. The word safe stopped meaning very much to me. Years later, when the television crew came to investigate our home, my family deliberately kept certain details from them. We wanted to see whether the investigators would discover anything without being told beforehand. According to my family, Amy Allen picked up on some of the things we had intentionally hidden. There was also a family history that made the situation even more complicated. My mother's side of the family is descended from John Bell, whose story is connected to the Bell Witch legend. We were told that throughout the history of our property, structures that had been built there had repeatedly been taken down or destroyed in strange circumstances. According to what we were told during the investigation, the spirits connected to the property seemed to have a history of interfering with anything built there. I had also experienced strange things over the years that I couldn't explain. There were even people who had independently told me they sensed something negative around me. Looking back, I believe something negative may have attached itself to me when I was 9 years old. At one point, after I experienced a seizure, a preacher at church told me that he believed he had removed one entity from me, but that something more powerful remained. My life afterward included an enormous amount of trauma and experiences that were difficult to process. I eventually decided to write a book about everything I had gone through and the things I believed were connected to my experiences with the paranormal. During the filming of The Dead Files, Amy Allen reportedly drew a sketch based on what she believed she was seeing from my childhood. The drawing showed me lying in my bed when I was 9 years old, with what appeared to be a dark entity at the end of the bed, almost as though it were controlling or puppeteering a young girl wearing a maxi skirt. That detail immediately reminded me of the girl my mother had described seeing on the first night we lived there. I still have photographs from the old house that I believe contain strange figures or unexplained shapes, along with other pictures taken after I moved away. Paranormal experiences have continued throughout my life, and I still don't feel like I've found anyone who could completely explain or remove whatever connection I believe followed me. I'm now writing a book about my experiences called Chained by Darkness, Haunted by My Past, Fighting for My Future, which I describe as being based on true events. This started one night a few years ago when I was getting ready for bed. My dog, who has since passed away, suddenly began growling at the bedroom door. The strange thing was that he never growled. He got off the bed and slowly moved toward the door while continuing to growl. I immediately got up, turned on the light, and looked around the room. There was nothing there. I walked through the house, checking the rooms and eventually going downstairs, but I couldn't find anything unusual. I asked my wife if she had heard something, but she hadn't. I came back upstairs, and by then the light was off again. The upstairs was completely dark. That immediately made me nervous because my first thought was that someone might actually be inside the house. I started checking every room and every closet, expecting at any moment to find someone hiding there. But there was nobody. I was so unsettled that I ended up sleeping downstairs on the couch that night. At first, I wondered if my wife was somehow messing with me. I couldn't think of another explanation, so I eventually tried to let it go. Over the next few days, however, my dog started growling again. This time it was happening in the upstairs living room. There was nothing obvious in the room, but my dog behaved as though something was standing there. He would stare toward a particular area and growl even though I couldn't see anything. Eventually, I told my wife what had been happening. We started joking that maybe there was a ghost in the house, although I still wasn't completely convinced. Part of me continued to think that she might somehow be behind some of it. Then something happened that changed my mind. My wife was coming upstairs while I was sitting at my computer with my back turned toward the stairs. I had a small desk lamp beside me, and as soon as she reached the top of the stairs, the lamp suddenly turned off. My room went completely dark. I immediately turned it back on. At that point, I knew my wife wasn't doing it. She was just as confused as I was, and it was becoming harder to pretend that everything had an ordinary explanation. As the strange incidents continued, I started developing the feeling that there was actually something in the house with us. Sometimes I would catch movement in the corner of my eye. Other times I would suddenly get chills for no obvious reason. There were moments when I couldn't shake the feeling that another person was standing nearby, even though I knew I was alone. Then, about 2 weeks before my dog passed away, something else happened. I was asleep when I suddenly woke up because I thought I heard my wife calling for the dog. My dog immediately jumped off the bed and ran toward the sound. I got up and followed him out of the room, but my wife wasn't there. My dog eventually came back into the bedroom and followed me, and when I went downstairs, I discovered that my wife was still in bed. We sleep in separate rooms, and whenever she comes upstairs, she normally says hello to me. She hadn't come upstairs at all. That experience stayed with me because my dog had reacted to the voice just as strongly as I had. The most recent incident happened tonight. I suddenly got the feeling that someone was walking into my room from the right side. I turned to look. There was nobody there, I said out loud. If someone is there, turn the lights off. Nothing happened. For a moment, I figured it was probably just my imagination. I got up to stretch and then headed downstairs. When I reached the stairs, I tried to turn on the stair light. It didn't come on. By that point, I was genuinely frightened. I went downstairs to tell my wife, and she became concerned too. She came upstairs with me to check the light. It still wouldn't turn on. She walked partway up the stairs and checked the bulb. That's when we noticed something strange. The bulb hadn't burned out. It had been unscrewed. I honestly don't know what to make of any of this. I don't know whether something is actually in the house or whether there is another explanation for everything that has happened. What I do know is that I don't feel comfortable sleeping upstairs anymore. And there's one detail I almost forgot to mention. My wife has told me that she often hears footsteps upstairs when I'm not home.